You know that feeling when you can't trust yourself anymore? When you're second guessing everything you do and everything you say, even your own gut instinct. That confusion, that constant walking in eggshells, that's not a personal flaw. That's a sign of something much, much deeper. In this episode, we're going to talk about narcissistic abuse. I'm not talking about the obvious stuff. I'm talking about the subtle, invisible kind that erode you from the inside out. My guest, Deanna, walks us through the gaslighting boundaries, why your body stays stuck in fight or flight after you leave, and most importantly, how to find your way back to yourself. If you ever lost in a relationship, blaming things that weren't your fault, and wonder if you might be going crazy, this conversation for you. Next on the podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Joe Foley. Thank you much for being here. Today we're going to be diving into something a lot of people experience, don't have words for: narcissistic abuse. Here's the thing. It's not always what you think. You probably picture yelling, belittling, obvious cruelty, but the most damaging kind it's kind of quiet. It's subtle. It's the comments made in front of friends, even laughing off, though kind of stung. It's being told, misunderstood, something you clearly heard. It's like having your reality questioned so many times that you can't trust yourself altogether. And the worst part of it, even after you leave your body, doesn't know you're safe. Your nerves are still fight or flight. You can't sleep. Your stress hormones are through the roof. Your immune system kind of tanks. That is what my guest, Deanna, calls the body keeping score. She's a healer coach and someone who lived through herself. She breaks down gaslighting, real examples, explains why you don't trust yourself anymore. Most importantly, shows you that healing is possible. If you ever felt confused, blamed, or like you lose your mind in a relationship, this one's for you. So let's jump into the interview with Deanna. Welcome to the podcast, Deanna.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks so much for having me.
What is narcissism in a relationship?
A great question. We see a lot of it now these days on social media, and that word actually, narcissist and narcissism, it's thrown around all over the place. And I often find that a lot of people don't really even truly understand what it means. So narcissism it's abuse, but it's not in the form that most people think of abuse. People think of physical abuse, right? That's the first kind of thing that comes to mind. It can be, but typically it's more emotional, verbal abuse, psychological abuse. It can also be financial abuse, sexual abuse. And again, like I said, it could be physical, it can escalate to physical. So these things are much more subtle. They're much more under the surface, and they're not as visible. And I speak to that thing that, in a relationship, most times if you are physically abused, it's wrong, right? This is not healthy. This is not okay. But a lot of times in a narcissistic relationship, all those other forms of abuse, they don't feel right, and it doesn't sit well, like intuitively with you, but you can't really put your finger on it and can't understand, and it doesn't feel as visible, right? It's not as cut and dried. It's not as black or white. And that's where people can stay stuck for a very long time and not even having the awareness that this is not okay. This is actually abusive, and it's not right.
Well, definitely interesting. I think about the relationships like that because, it's obviously an abuse when somebody, hits somebody or,
Sure.
says bad things to them, like really, really, really mean and
Sure.
nasty things to them.
Yes.
But one thing I was thinking about is when somebody says, I don't trust myself anymore, what does that tell you right away?
Well, it's interesting. When someone doesn't trust themselves and they don't trust their intuition or their own sense of clarity in making decisions, it can come from a bunch of different places. It can come from very deep insecurity inside of them, but that can also be a result of the relationships around them. So, growing up, obviously, all of our childhood relationships, the family structure, our role with children, and we learn what we learn. And we think that however we grow up is what we think is normal, right? And then we get older and we have our own relationships, friendships, intimate relationships. And that's where we really start to see like what actually is healthy or not. So when you say like, I don't trust myself, that can be very deep rooted from, again, from childhood and then based on the relationships that you're in. So for example, again, I can speak very much from my own personal experience, but I do see the patterns amongst a lot of people that I work with. So I used to always say, I'm just so indecisive. I can't make a decision, right? And I kind of put it in a very negative light and put myself down to say, oh, I don't know what I want. I don't know even what I want to eat for dinner. I don't know what I want at the store. But I realized after my recovery that it wasn't indecisiveness. It wasn't that I couldn't make a decision. It's that I did learn to not trust myself anymore. I didn't trust my own, just sense of decisions on small things, and then obviously leading up to bigger things as well. So that can be rooted, yeah, it can be rooted in unhealthy relationships, which oftentimes are rooted in childhood because it's not a coincidence, who we attract in a romantic or intimate relationship. It's not a coincidence of how that works out. We typically attract something that's familiar, something that's similar to what we know in growing up. So it's very common. It's very common for a person to say, I find myself in this narcissistic, abusive relationship, but it kind of mimicked the relationship with my mom or my dad, right? That's very, very common because that's the familiar piece that you are attracted to, if that makes sense.
Well, definitely too. I was thinking about that when you were talking about childhood and stuff like that. It made me come up on an idea that how was that for you as a child? Did you have an experience when you were a child that could stand out? That give me an example.
Yeah. Well, again, it can be it can be one major experience, a traumatic experience specifically, or it can be just, a bunch of experiences overall in your childhood. And I will say that in growing up, I definitely didn't feel seen or heard for who I am as a person. And I will say that my father definitely, put me down for being very sensitive, being very emotional, being the kind of thing where it was like, oh, Deanna, you're such a crybaby and you're so emotional. You're too emotional. You're too sensitive, right? And those are things that are
Mhm.
again, put with a negative connotation. So as a child, you grow up, again, speaking for myself, but I see this all over. I grew up thinking it's not a good thing that I am who I am, right? Now, and again, I believe we all have innate traits that make us unique, that make us who we are on this world. And I grew up, thinking that that was a bad thing. And then when I entered, adulthood, and then it's only natural that I attracted that kind of relationship for my marriage, which perpetuated that same narrative of Deanna, it's you're the problem. You're too sensitive. You're too emotional. And so again, I can recognize now at this point in my life, realizing that it was rooted in that childhood piece of my father and other people that, kind of presented that narrative to me. And then I perpetuated into romantic relationships and into marriage, that kind of thing, where now I recognize, and it's been an interesting journey for myself, but I've recognized that actually my big superpower is my empathy. And that's how I help people. And that is a sensitivity. That is being highly sensitive to other people's needs and feelings. And that's how I help my clients and my friends and my family. But I had to change that mindset because I thought for most of my life, I thought it was a bad thing until I embraced it and realized, no, this is actually who I am. And this is a wonderful thing.
Well, definitely too. It's just interesting how you can trace back some of the stuff we deal with as an adults back to our childhood and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I give an example. My stepfather, who was abusive and when I was younger and stuff like that, he would call me stupid.
Yeah.
Then you're dumb, you're stupid, you can't do anything. You're gonna, and that you realize, well, that does affect you when you get older,
Of course
because
it
you're
does.
not stupid. You are smart.
Of
You can do
course it
things
does.
and stuff like that. But you do see that stuff as a child, and you see that as you get older, and stuff that affects your relationship.
And it affects every relationship you have, again, not just your romantic relationships, your friendships, your work relationships, of course, because if you think about that, and that's honestly, Joe, that's a perfect example of, when you're a parent and you're raising a child, and if a child hears that enough times growing up, right, they take it in, they absorb it, and they believe it. They believe it to be true. And that absolutely affects their confidence, their self-esteem, right? Their sense of trusting themselves, their all of those things. And it's oftentimes not until we get older, and whether we have some sort of experience as we get older that takes us back. I talk about this all the time. Like we have to go back in time to be able to understand, things that happen in our childhood to be able to go and move forward, if that makes sense. And And that's where it comes from. And that's where the thing is, a lot of times people in their in healing and just in general in their life, they don't want to go back there, right? It's painful. It's hurtful. I don't want to go back to the place where somebody was telling me I was stupid and I was unintelligent, right? That hurts, right? Because of course that's inside of you. But oftentimes the only way to heal from that is to go back, understand where it came from, understand that that wasn't you, Joe. That was his own insecurity. That was his projections on you, right? That you took in and carried with you. And so that's where I help other people in recognizing those things and the awareness around that to say, okay, then if that's not even mine, I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to allow that to be my narrative in going forward in my life because it's inhibiting for sure.
Well, definitely too. You hit on something I tell my son all the time, about especially when you go to school. Kids will try to bully you or act out on you, make fun of you or something. I
Yeah.
go, it's not really about you. It's about them. It's about their insecurity. When you said that came to mind because that's the thing I tell my son all the time
Yes,
about their
absolutely. And absolutely, Joe. And you know what? It's funny that you say that about with kids because the same thing with my children and teaching them as they were getting older about bully. Well, pretty much in your simplest terms, a narcissist is just a big bully, right? Whether it's a child, a teenager, an adult, okay, is a big bully. And you're absolutely right. It has actually nothing to do with you, but someone will take that very personally. Someone is, being mean to you, right? You take that internally. That is personal, but it actually has nothing to do with you. It's about them externalizing their own insecurities and their own issues, what they have not dealt with and refuse to deal with. And that's where it's, for me, awareness is the biggest tool that you can have. When you're not aware of something, you can't really change it or fix it. But when you're aware of that and say, if you can look at it, even for your son, right? If he can look at, this kid is being really mean to me at school. But if you can take a step back and say, it actually has nothing to do with me, and he has his own issues or whatever, that really changes things. It's a mindset change.
Well, definitely too. I think that and it's helped the kids, especially when they get older,
Yes.
with their self confidence and stuff like that.
Self-confidence for sure, but it also, and this speaks more on a human level, if you can look at anyone, whether it's a child or an adult, and see that's where that comes from, their own insecurities, I find it really brings you to a place of finding compassion for someone else. So for example, even in my
Hmm.
own situation or for anyone, I can recognize that someone has hurt me very, very deeply, right? I don't justify the behaviors or the actions that hurt me, but I can also take a step back and find compassion for that person to say, you know what? Hurt people, that whole saying, right? They're coming from a place that
Hmm.
they've been hurt and they don't know what to do with it and they're projecting it out on me. So it does not justify, the behaviors, but I can find, and I try to teach people to get to that place, right, of finding that compassion because I think that's really important in this world.
Well, definitely too. But how do you define a healthy relationship?
That's a great question. There's many different things, but the biggest thing, the first thing that's coming to my mind is in a healthy relationship, there are boundaries, within the relationship
Mhm.
that are respected. So in the sense of needs, and I don't, boundaries sometimes can also be misunderstood. Oh, that's a bad thing. I have to protect myself. Boundaries can be very healthy to say, oh, listen, it could be something as simple as when I get home from work, I need to decompress and I need a little time, maybe 5, 10 minutes. Please don't, barrage me, come to me with all these questions. I need a little time and space to kind of decompress and come back into the personal life. And then your partner or the person that you're with says, you know what? I absolutely understand that. Maybe I don't need that personally, but I respect the fact that you need that. So sure, of course. So it's setting a boundary and the other person respecting that boundary of what your need. We are human and we all have needs, right? We all have needs. In an unhealthy relationship, it's saying, oh, that's great that you need that. I don't really care. And I'm going to do what I want anyway. And when you come home, walk in the door, I'm going to ask you 20 questions and need you to do this, that, whatever. That's a simple example, but that would be a big difference. Healthy relationship is
Well,
feeling heard, feeling seen for who you are, having the person that you're with. I look at it in simplest terms is having the person that you're with bringing out the best version of you, not the worst version. And that's really a big distinction. When you're in an unhealthy relationship, an abusive relationship, that person brings out the worst side of you because you're in defense mode and you're kind of always on the defense. A healthy relationship, you complement each other, you lift each other up, and that person brings out the best side of you. And I don't know, in simplest terms, I think that's what it looks like.
I understand the other part of the negative part of it, but how can somebody work with their partner to bring out the best side of them?
If it's a healthy relationship, you mean?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
absolutely. Well, I think that comes from a place of fostering, wanting the best for your person, for the person in your relationship. I look at it again on a very collective level. I believe that we are all here for a reason. We all have gifts that we're meant to share with this world. You want to use, then the light that we're meant to shine and help others, right? So when you're in
Mhm.
a relationship, a romantic relationship, you want the other person to understand who you are, right? Really see you and watch to help foster you chase your goals and dreams. That's how I look at it. It shouldn't be, you can live parallel lives in the sense of we're all individuals. So we all have our individual journey, but the person that you're with should be really encouraging you and motivating you, again, to be the best version of yourself, to be able to accomplish whatever it is in your life that you're looking to accomplish, not hold you back.
Well, definitely too. Also it's interesting about relationships. Sometimes it doesn't always happen all at once. The situation deteriorates after a while. What are some subtle signs that could, hey, listen, time out. We need to work on some stuff here. When do you reach out and get some help and realize the signs of what's going on?
Well, sure. I mean, again, every, relationship is different. I think the big thing there is what's coming is compromise. In a healthy relationship, there's always compromise. And no matter what it is, small things, big things, it's saying, okay, well, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm needing. Okay, you might feel differently, but let's find some sort of common grounds, right? If there's no compromise in a relationship, and that speaks for friendship as well, any kind of relationship, and there's really no relationship. You have to be able to meet people on a level of respect, seeing each other of who they are. And I think that compromise is a big piece of that. In a healthy relationship, if you're having some issues, just struggling with whatever the case is, and you go and seek counseling, professional help, then that's a tool that can only enhance your relationship. You talk things out. Maybe you're just not seeing things from the same side, right? And a professional can help you get there and guide you in maybe, again, that awareness piece. But if you're in an unhealthy relationship and you seek professional help, typically nothing will change. It might be the dialogue might be in those sessions, and I lived this personally. Oh yeah, I'm going to change this, that, the other. I'm going to communicate better and do that. But in the end, nothing changes. So, and it's okay. Well, then I don't really understand what's happening here. We're trying to get help, but yet on the surface, it might seem things are, but nothing is changing. So I do believe that comes back to, again, if a person is unable to take accountability for their own actions, then you're really not going to see much results.
What are some unhealthy signs of narcissism showing up in the relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, inability to compromise. And a big one is inability to take accountability for your actions. And this is a big one. So a narcissist literally cannot hold themselves accountable for their actions. They are not capable. They believe that whatever they do is right, is perfect. They always have this incessant need to be right. So if you come to them and say, you know what, something you said or did was really upsetting and I want to talk about it, there's a refusal there. They cannot admit that they did something wrong because then in their mind, and there's the whole psychology of the narcissist's mind, is that if they were to admit that they were wrong in something, then then that messes with their psyche of that I'm perfect and that everything that I do is great. So there is an inability to take accountability for any of their actions. So again, I can speak to this personally over a very long tier, many, many years of, let's say, again, something happened, whatever, within our family or we were with friends at an event, an occasion, and something that, this person said hurt me. I would go and say, you know what? That really hurt me when you said this, when you did this. And there was never any accountability. It was never in a normal, healthy relationship, whether that's friendship or an intimate relationship. A person will say, you know what? I didn't realize that I hurt you. And I'm sorry, because that certainly wasn't my intention. Talk to me, tell me what it was, because I want to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future. But that was never the conversation. It was always, you must have misunderstood, Deanna. You got it wrong. You heard that wrong. You didn't, something you did. It was always pushing the blame. There's always blame, right? Blame back on me that something I did must have warranted it, or I must have misunderstood. And that's where that goes back to what we earlier talked about, the not trusting yourself, because that's gaslighting at its finest. And again, that's a term that's thrown around a lot today. But true gaslighting is then you then walk away and you think, huh, okay, well, I don't remember it that way, but you're being told a reality that is not the truth. And so then you start to question yourself and you start to say, well, maybe it is me and maybe I am the problem. And maybe, and that's where that eats away over time. It's a process, eats away at your self-confidence, and even trusting yourself. Where in a healthy relationship, you'd say, again, I don't know, you own it. You own it. Whatever the case is. I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry that hurt you, right? And another key there is that lack of emotion, that lack of remorse. Again, in a human situation, if you hurt someone, however, there's typically remorse. You typically feel bad, right? You don't want to hurt someone. In a narcissistic relationship, there's zero remorse. It's, well, that happened and that's on you. Oh, well. And it almost, I can't even explain it, but it's almost like this robotic exterior of zero emotion. Well, that's on you. And that's not normal. That's not normal or healthy.
Well, and I was thinking about, you were talking about gaslighting.
Yeah.
And can you give me an example in your life that you've been a real world example? Because I think that gaslighting is kind of tossed around a lot. And I've heard that saying a lot too, but can you give me a real world example that you experienced?
Oh, well, many, 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 many. And that's why let me just pause for a second to think of one that can be clear and concise because it can look different and it comes in different shapes and forms. Let me try to think of something that's just clear. Okay, so let's say you're at a party and you're with, the person, your partner in the relationship, and you're in front of people, you're in front of friends, family, and your partner says something in front of the crowd, right? That's kind of
Hmm.
insulting or puts you down, right? I'm going to just use a very simple example. You brought food there and, whatever you cooked, it didn't really taste good. Everyone here at the party doesn't what you brought. Okay. Sounds insulting, right?
Hmm.
And then you kind of laugh it off because you're in a setting. So you're just, oh, ha, ha, it's a joke, right? But you really took that in. That's, I came here, I brought a dish to share with everyone. And the intention was that it tastes well. And now my partner just told me that everyone here doesn't have food that I brought, right? So you go through the rest of the night, you go home and you approach your partner and you say, listen, when you said that in front of everyone, even if that were true about my food not tasting well, that was really hurtful. It hurt my feelings. So now you're trying to, again, just be in the healthy state of saying, this hurt me. Let's talk about it. In that situation, typically a narcissist will, in the gaslighting piece of that, is say, Deanna, I don't even know what you're talking about. I never said that. And they'll maybe completely deny even saying something, which is a very common one. They'll try to, again, shift that reality and say, or say, Deanna, I didn't say that. You must have heard that wrong. Okay. So now I'm thinking to myself, I know what you said because it hurt me, right? But now I'm being told that he didn't say that. So is it me? Did I misunderstand that? Did I get that wrong? Right. And so you walk away very, very confused. The end result of gaslighting in whatever form is confusion, and it's meant to confuse. Okay. Because now I walk away thinking, well, not only did I not get the apology for what I was looking for because I was hurt, but now I think maybe I misunderstood. It wasn't me. And there's just confusion. So there's no remorse, no apology. Nothing was resolved. It's going to happen again. And just mass confusion. That's not healthy in any kind of relationship at all. Let's turn that to the healthier piece, right? If I
Hmm.
came to my partner at the end of the night and said, you know what you said, that really hurt me, especially it was in front of all of our friends and family. It was also embarrassing, which a lot of times is intentionally meant to embarrass or humiliate. In a healthy relationship, that person was, oh my gosh, I was just joking around, but I didn't wasn't my intention to hurt you. I'm so sorry. Tell me, exactly what I said so that I make sure that I don't do that again. Please understand that's not where it came from. That's a very, very different energy between those two conversations.
One thing I was thinking about too while you're talking about is the physical effect on the body. The stress, always living with that stress. Because they said, besides, I think stress is one of the top things that really causes real health problems
Yes.
and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
what is the body response also?
Absolutely. It's such a great question. That's my world, what I live in. I'm a huge mind, body, spirit believer in my work and just in general. Okay. So if you are being abused this way, in this verbal way, again, which can be very subtle where you might not even catch it, it absolutely affects the body and the spirit. So you're then almost trained to live in this state of anxiety, this state of, they call it in the narcissistic world, the walking on eggshells. I don't know when that's going to happen again. And I don't know, because there's going to be another situation, right? And so your body is in this state of fight or flight or freeze. And that's the nervous system response. Okay. That's the sympathetic nervous system that a lot of people talk about, right? Now, this part of our body is meant to save us. If you are literally running from a tiger, okay, or if you are in a dangerous situation, that's our physical body's response to that is that fight or flight. There's hormone, there's a hormonal component to it, the adrenaline, right? Because you're meant to muster all of your energy to run, to get out of this dangerous situation. When you're in a narcissistic relationship, you are living in that fight or flight all the time, chronically, okay? Our bodies are not meant to live that way in any way, shape, or form. So it then starts to affect, again, over time, it starts to affect many things physically in our body, our hormones, our cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, okay? Chronic stress, and not just from narcissistic relationships, from other things. Chronic stress over time will absolutely affect you. It then lowers your immune system. You're more susceptible to sickness, to illness, to autoimmune diseases. Honestly, even to cancer. I mean, a prolonged period of stress in your life can absolutely lead to physical symptoms, which is what I see all the time. And then a lot of times from that state, people say, well, how did I get here? I don't even understand how this happened. Well, then you start to pick apart. Well, tell me about your world. Tell me what's going on in your life. And oftentimes, and this is where I see this all the time, people say I'm struggling with something physical. A lot of times they'll go to every doctor, every specialist, and maybe there's nothing physically wrong with that. And they can say, well, my charts come back okay, my blood work comes back okay, but I don't feel okay. Something's not right. Oftentimes it is based in stress from some situation in their life that's emotional. It's that, one of my favorite books is the Body Keeps the Score, because it speaks to this connection. It's saying when you are under stress emotionally, verbally, spiritually, that stays in your body. Your body holds it, okay? And that's where, again, it just can breed illness.
Well, I definitely can relate to that a little bit too, is, stress from the everyday life and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, when I'm driving to work, I can feel, because all of a sudden, cars are closing in on me. I'm getting blocked in. I'm in the middle lane. All of a sudden, I can really tense up, because it's not about my driving. It's probably about all the other stuff building up around me.
Yes.
And you're like,
Yes.
driving. Oh, they can't see my eyes bugging out. But I mean, I'd be driving. Definitely feel the tension and stuff like that. But one thing I was curious about, even after the relationship ends, does the body still in fight or flight mode?
Yeah. Great question, Joe. Absolutely. I just want to say one quick thing just back, and then I'll go forward. Exactly. I mean, you can relate this to anything in your life. It doesn't have to be being in a narcissistic relationship. If you are miserable at your job, right? Or not even miserable, maybe it's just a very high stress job. Maybe you enjoy it, but it's the stress of it really, gives you anxiety. Then it's the same effect on the nervous system. Exactly. You're driving to work and maybe oh my God, you're feeling that tension and that anxiety in your body. And I've had that experience as well in my lifetime. So yes, not just it can be something else other than a relationship. Just want to make that point. But in going forward, I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Hold on to cortisol, and you just can't get rid of it. You're weight gain.
Yes.
Can't sleep.
Yes.
And so even after, I think, probably relationship ends, I was wondering your thoughts about that.
Oh, that's such a great question, Joe. Okay, so the same way, typically the abuse takes its effect on your body, it's over time, right? It's a slow process, slow and settled process. It doesn't happen overnight. So it just can't recover itself overnight either, if that makes sense. Okay. So you may have left the toxic relationship. However, the effects of that relationship is still in your body. It's embedded, right, into your nervous system, into your mind, also your mindset, right? The neuroplasticity of the mind. We are wired a lot of people will say, oh, I'm just wired that way, right? Well, you were trained that way, right? So, and this is where a lot of what the work that I do helps people try to understand it, almost picking it apart and saying, okay, well, this was not mine, first of all. This is someone else's trauma that was projected on me, right? I recognize I need to leave this relationship because it's not healthy for me. So you might be physically out of the relationship, but the recovery piece is a whole different story, right? The recovery takes time as well and does not happen overnight. And there's many, many different ways to recover, but the goal is retraining your body and your nervous system and the wiring in your brain to a healthier state. So this just speaks to a little bit of the work that I do. I do massage, I do coaching, I do Reiki energy healing, especially with this piece of releasing from the body emotional trauma, emotional baggage, whatever you want to call it, that I've helped a lot of people with, because yes, we hold that and now we don't know what to do with it. How do I get it out of my body? I don't want it there anymore. So energy healing is an amazing way and a very powerful way to be able to help people to do that. But I also speak to that very often. Again, I wish many people, we wish that it could say, okay, I've had all this baggage. We all have baggage in our life, right? And I wish I could just drop these luggages right here and just drop it all at once and be done and move on, right? We wish it can be that way, but it didn't happen that way. So you're not going to be able to, recover that way. Typically, the healing process is, again, a slow and steady journey, a very intentional journey. So you're releasing things little by little. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a session and all certain hurtful memories come up. They're embedded in your body. But now we're going to attack maybe those 3 memories, those 3 hurtful experiences. Let's attack those one by one. And then you have time to release that, process it, whatever it is, accept it, forgive it, get rid of it. I don't want this in my body. And then you do another session and you do the same thing. So it's a slower process. But I will say, and again, speaking from experience, it's a beautiful journey. And when I say that, I try to highlight the positive always, to say that it's a journey of self rediscovery. You're coming back to you. You're coming back to yourself, to trusting yourself, to understanding yourself, who you are authentically. And again, what you are here to do in this world that was just clouded and covered and just bombarded with somebody else's stuff. People talk about the layers of the onion, but you're kind of just unburying yourself from all of this stuff to find you again, to get back to who you are at your core. So yes, it takes time to heal the nervous system. It takes time to, rewire that neuroplasticity of the brain, but it is absolutely possible. I'm a living example of that, and I knew many, many people around me as well.
A lot of people be skeptics about energy healing and holistic healing. If you had one thing to say, how can you convince them that it really does help?
And I see that all the time, and I hear it all the time, for sure. What's one thing that can convince them? To me, what I always say is all you need is an open mind and an open heart, okay? Typically, as humans, and this is just across the board, it's the fear of the unknown. If I don't understand something or know what something is, then I'm just going to keep that at arm's length because I don't really want to deal with that, right? I don't know what that is. And trust me when I tell you, I get that a lot, okay? I don't know what it is you do, Deanna, that woo-woo stuff, okay? So I don't know, and I'm fearful, and I'm just going to keep that door shut, okay, right? And that's okay. I meet people where they are because I was there myself years ago, okay? But what I say is that it's the kind of thing, and actually, Joe, I do relate it to parenting a lot, because parenting is something that many people can relate to. It's the kind of thing that unless you are a parent yourself, you cannot understand what it's to be a parent. Unless you've been in that experience, many times people, single people or people that don't have kids try to advise parents. And I appreciate your suggestions, but you don't understand by any means what it's, because you're not a parent, right? Right? Am I wrong? Right? Right. Exactly. And that's with anything. I can't pretend to understand someone's situation. Maybe they have an autoimmune disease or, a child with autism. If that's not my world, I can have sympathy and I can have empathy for that person, but I cannot understand it. So it's the same concept. And so I always try to say with energy work, unless you've experienced it, it's really hard to understand and even, explain it to other people. So I kind of try to meet people in that place of, are you just willing to try something new that can help you? Because energy work can do no harm. It can only help you. And that's where I kind of meet people in that place of just being curious. You know what? It doesn't have to come from a fearful place. Most people today, Joe, in the world that we live in the modern world, and where people are suffering on so many different levels, and whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, there are people suffering everywhere. We're human and we all suffer. And most times it will take somebody getting to a place of desperation to say, I'm all out of tricks, right? I don't know what else to do. Nothing I'm doing is working. And that's when I meet most people in their very desperate state of saying, okay, Deanna, I'll try it because I've got nothing left. And I actually love that space. I love meeting people there and say, because I know that this can open up your world spiritually and helping you on every level.
What does healing really look like?
Yeah.
What is healing? Can you give me an example of somebody that stood out to you that you work with? You don't have to tell them their names, but
Right.
what is healing that really stuck out to you from your experience with a
Mm.
client?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many. But healing, I even just, you're making me reflect for a second. What does healing look like? Looks different to everyone, of course, but on a very simple level, healing is coming back to you. It's coming back to who you are, connecting with your body, connecting with your heart, your intuition, and your spirit. Because I see this and live this all the time. I hold the space for somebody to connect. That's how I say it. I'm not doing the healing, right? I'm holding that space, a quiet, still, beautiful, loving, sacred space for somebody else to go within, to go and connect to themselves. So that, to me, that's what healing looks like. And it's a beautiful place.
Did anybody stood out to you that you're like, wow, I was really great to work with?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I love all the clients that I work with, but yes, there's a few that stick out, and only because I do feel that it's their intention. When someone is
Hmm.
very intentional about their healing, they're saying, you know what, my life as it is, it's not working, right? I'm drinking too much. I'm not eating right. I physically feel awful. Mentally, I'm not okay. I have anxiety. I'm not sleeping well. All of these things, right? They get to a point where they say, I'm being very intentional. I need to change something. So the clients that I work with that are really intentional about their healing and their recovery of just getting to the other side of whatever it is that they're dealing with are the best ones, because you see the healing, it happen quicker. It can happen all the time for people, but if you're skeptical, if you kind of, willy-nilly about it, right? But it's the people that are very focused. I want to change things in my life because it's not working. What's happening? So I help people with addictions. Grief is a big one that I help people with, and not just grieving, a person who's passed, but grieving things in our life, grieving relationships, whether the jobs, moves, grieving an old version of ourselves, right? We're always striving to be the better version of ourselves. We do have to grieve the person we were before. So I help people a lot of those realms. And yeah, it's beautiful to watch. And I have a couple of clients that stand out that I've been watching and a part of their journey, and it's so beautiful.
Well, definitely too. I can think that, grief, you mentioned grief can be from divorce too, also, and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Relationships, of course. Absolutely.
What is one thing a listener can stop doing today that would help immediately?
In the terms of what? As someone, it was in this kind of relationship or?
In the terms of what is one piece of advice that would help a listener today that would help them right now?
Okay.
Like one piece of advice if they're in a relationship or gets, help them relieve their stress and maybe in a narcissist relationship.
Okay, great. Again, I mean, all these tools flood to my brain, but the biggest thing is finding some stillness in your life, and meditation is coming to me. And again, that could be, stillness can come in a lot of different forms, whether it's getting outside, taking a walk in nature, meditating, yoga, or anything like that, because really healing happens where there is stillness. So just going back to that nervous system response, you cannot heal if
Hmm.
your body is in that fight or flight, right? No healing is going to happen there. Okay. The opposite of that from a scientific place, from a physical place, is the rest and digest. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the exact opposite of fight, flight, or freeze. That is the place where healing happens. That is the place where we want to be. So that is the place that I help people get to when they come for a session. However, on your own, you can get to that place. It's about being still. We live in a very busy world, and we're always going and always moving, and we have 1,000 million distractions in our mind. We don't give our mind a time to shut off. We don't give our heart time to even listen. Stillness is very, very key in connecting with yourself, connecting with your heart and your spirit to figuring out your next steps in life. So that's something I advise all the time. I help people get there, but also helping them get there themselves. And meditation is a great way.
Well, definitely too. I was thinking about, I want to say wrapping up final thoughts, but that was a really good way for final thought for ending the conversation. Where they can connect to, find more about you, more about your resources you have, places and things you offer.
Absolutely. So my website is probably the best place to find me. It's w.healinghandsbydeanna.com. I am based physically in Charlotte, North Carolina. So obviously if you're coming from massage, you'd have to be local, but Reiki energy healing I do often virtually. So that is something that I can do to anyone wherever you live in the country or even the world. And I also do coaching sessions as well, intuitive coaching, and specifically again for these narcissistic abuse people of recovery, because I've been there personally. Again, coaching sessions can be virtual as well. So all of my information of my services and what I offer is on my website. I also do have a YouTube channel where I do videos on helpful mind, body, spirit tips and self-care tools. And I also have a group listed on Meetup that is for narcissistic abuse recovery survivors as well.
Deanna, thank you much for being on the podcast today. All links will be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I want to thank Deanna for being a real vulnerable with us today. In this episode, resonate, do 3 things. First, share with somebody who needs to hear it. You might be the person who helps them recognize what's happening. It's really important. Second, check out Deanna's resources in the show notes, her website, YouTube channel, and her Meetup community for narcissistic abuse survivors. The link healinghandsdeanna.com. Third, hit the subscribe button and leave a review. Help other people find us. It matters more than you know. You're not broken. You're not crazy. You're just healing. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care. God bless. See ya.